on the sofa today with me, I've got Emily and Michelle. And we wanted to touch on this subject because it's something that we come across in our professional life. And it's the challenges that people face when they've inherited money. And if you've not been in that position yourself, you might be surprised at some of the things that are going on in people's heads. And what we want to do is just share some stories of the things that we've seen and how we've seen our clients move past the challenges. Because if it's a situation that you're in, it can feel really lonely. It can feel like there's nobody else to talk about. Or maybe someone you know is in this situation. Maybe it'll help you think differently or talk differently to them, but generally just help them with the situation that they're in. So today is the main blocks that we have around inherited money. So hello there, Emily. How are you today?
I'm very well, Julie. How are you?
All right. Now, Emily, I have a sneaky suspicion that you're going to have a story to share with us on this.
Oh, I don't know where you got that idea from. I'll do my best. No, I think that this is something that a lot of financial planners will have experience of because a lot of people do come to me with money that they feel is not theirs, that they've not earned, and that has been given to them as a result of a loved one dying, often a spouse or a parent. And one time that it really became very apparent to me as to how people feel about that type of money was when I had a lady who, she was sitting on quite a lot of money. She was living a life that was, very frugal, not really doing very much, didn't go on holiday. And I thought to myself, why is she living like this when she could be having a very different life? And I said, you could be spending more money and enjoying this money a bit more. And she paused and she looked at me and she said, well, the problem is I don't really see it as money that's for me. Yes, it's been left to me by my late husband, but it was always his intention, I feel, that the money should go down generations. And therefore, I am just a custodian of this money. I'm going to look after it. And that's why it's important that you help me grow it and make sure it doesn't disappear. But I just don't feel that I want to go out and spend it, and I want to make sure that I do pass it on as a legacy. And I felt quite sad about that because I'm pretty certain that that wasn't her husband's sole intention, that she should just sit on it. I'm sure that he would have wanted her to have continued to enjoy life in the same way they did when he was alive.
I think it's the phrase that you used there. It's the actual phrase, actually, custodian. Also, the concept of it is that it's that you are there to guard and protect the money, but it is not for you to enjoy. And that's something that I see come up time and time again, especially with the people that I work with. But it's this notion that it's not yours. You're looking after it for someone else. And that is something that is really common. So thanks for that, Emily, because I knew that you'd get us off to a good start. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is something we do see a lot, in our work every day, whether it be the children inherit, husband, wife, etc. And I think also from a personal point of view, it's something that I've experienced, and it's very strange because you can talk about how it is with other people, but until it happens to you, it's a very different matter, and it's a very emotionally challenging place to be.
Okay, tell me more about that, about it being emotionally challenging.
So I had the scenario where I have unfortunately lost both my parents. My dad had cancer and was ill for a number of years. So to an extent, we prepared for him. We knew what to do. We prepared the money. You emotionally say goodbye during that time, and you prepare everything, including everything going to my mum on his passing, which was what he wanted. He wanted her to enjoy that life. So I helped my mum administer my dad's estate, and we did all the work. We did all his pensions, and I was okay with that because I'd had a long time to prepare. Sadly, my mum passed away unexpectedly 3 months after my dad. She was only 61, so it was very unexpected. Now, that really changed how I felt about the money, because I was looking after it for my mum and helping my mum. You know, and they didn't have lots and lots of money. It was their house, it was their car, it was their savings that they held. And we planned this all out. And it was very difficult to then suddenly go from helping my mum and arranging my mum's finances to dealing with her estate. And in the job I do, you know, it did fall to me to sort of help with that. And I was also the local one. So I have, you know, 2 step siblings. I knew my mum's wishes. So she had also died without a will, which I know we've covered in many other episodes, but that had its own complications. But dealing with the estate, I found really challenging because, one, you're trying to do the best with the things that they built up throughout their life, you know, selling their house, they looked after their house, you're selling it, which I did through COVID, which was a horrific experience, I have to say, and trying to get the best for it. But again, even that's challenging because you're trying to get the most for it, but you also, that makes you feel very at odds with yourself because you're trying to maximize the value of something that actually you don't really want to be dealing with or even doing, but you're doing it because they've built that up. And of course, administering the estate, I knew how it was going to be split. I knew what my mum had wanted to do, and I was following her wishes and always would. And then it also meant I wanted to make sure my children were looked after. So I was the one making the decisions as to who got what. And that's really difficult.
That's a big responsibility, isn't it?
It was huge. And, you know, and it took me 2.5 years. It wasn't a small, you know, thing to do. We had to have, you know, a solicitor involved because there was no will. So we had to have deeds and things drawn up. But at the end of it, I knew what my mum wanted. I'd given money to my niece, my children, and that's gone into trust. So that was fine. I could deal with that. I could give them their share. And then I had this amount of money in the bank. And that was really hard because I didn't actually want to deal with it at all.
Who was that money for, Michelle?
That was mine.
Okay. So professional Michelle did a kick-ass job of sorting out an estate without a will, gets it all done, and then there's a lump of money left over for Michelle, and you felt
guilty. I think guilty. I didn't want to touch that because at the end of the day, I think as we all would, we'd rather have that loved one back. You don't want their money. You want it back. And regardless of how many times you've had the conversation with your, you know, your other half or your parents about what they would like you to do with that money, it just gets clouded. You can't think straight. My mum had always said, you know, I want to help you with a deposit for a house. I want to help my grandchildren. I want to do these things. And I had some sort of things in the background I wanted to pay off. And she'd always said, and actually she was looking at downsizing to release money to help us to do these things.
Yeah.
But even that it took me probably a good 4 or 5 months to actually deal with the initial bits that we'd always talked about me doing when I got money from my mum, which would hopefully have been through downsizing. But I can tell you now, half of it is still sat in the bank.
Right. So I'm just doing a little mental timeline here. And I think the penny has just dropped with me. Your solution to having money in the bank that you feel guilty about and you would rather have your mum back was to go and train to be a financial coach.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
I did not know that at the time because Michelle and I trained together.
So I did my training whilst I was dealing with the estate.
So do you think your feelings have changed any now?
I don't think they've changed because I think there'll always be this emotional guilt that sits with that money. And every time I use any of that money, I go through an internal process of, I don't want to use it. I don't want it to go down. I don't want to spend it. That's my mum's money. And it takes me probably 2 to 3 weeks to get through this whole process, actually do what I'm going to do. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I had to take £500 out of it. You would not believe what I went through in that period of just taking that money, because I put it in, you know, I've got some in cash, some in premium bonds, and you have to go through a process to release that money, to actually press that button and say, yes, was quite an ordeal. But once it's done, I'm okay with it, but it's the actual doing it.
Okay, now this is bringing something else up for me. This client that I've worked with, let's call her Claire. And it's right. This is really sad, folks, I'm afraid. Okay, but we do have a happy ending. Okay, Claire, unfortunately, her father died, suicide. He'd left her a substantial amount of money, and she was the only person involved. And she'd studied for years and years and years to become a barrister. And everybody thinks they make lots of money. They don't. Not at the start, they don't. So she had a lot of debt and not a lot of salary. And dad had left her all this money. And it was that, the pushing the button.
Yeah.
But she knew that she should clear her student loans, but she couldn't do it.
No, and I can totally understand that.
So she'd log in, I think maybe it was to internet banking site, to try and send the money to clear the debt, and couldn't do it. And this went on in a cycle. This went on for about 18 months. So every 3 or 4 months, she'd log back in and try and do it and couldn't. And she'd just walk away and she'd go to student loans. And that's whoever the debt was with and just say, like, how much do I owe you? Log back into internet banking. Nope, still can't do it. And she eventually came to me and we just worked through it. And I think for anybody that is actually dealing with this, it's hard. You've got so much emotion going on there because you're dealing with grief. And even if it's been a sudden death, that's horrible. If it's been a death that you know is coming, that's horrible. If it's suicide, that's horrible and nobody wants to talk about it. So whatever it is, it's just you've got this maelstrom of emotions going on and they are not facilitating you making good decisions.
No.
It's impossible to do. It's physically not possible. So what we did is we just kind of took a step back from the feelings about our dad and just went back to her childhood and talked about money then. And it was almost like she was relearning and reliving the story of her dad and their family growing up and money. And as she worked through that, she started to understand why she broke into a sweat at the thought of pushing the button. And we did eventually she couldn't pay it all off in one go. We arranged it so she would do small bits at a time and break it down, and almost like build up a tolerance to it.
Yeah.
So she did eventually get there. But it was just somebody sitting there with all this debt, and they've got all this money, and they just can't put the two together.
And I think that's hard for anybody. I think even with all the training I've got, I still couldn't get past that. And I think, so for somebody who doesn't even have that training behind them, how hard must that be?
They were in an impossible situation because they felt guilty for not paying the debt off, but they couldn't cope with the guilt of using the money. It was an impossible situation. Emily, what have you got for us?
I was just going to ask a question because to me, first of all, it popped up in my head, well, why didn't she just get somebody else to hit the button? But does that, because I'm not a coach and you two will have the answers because you are, but does that defeat the purpose? You've got to go through that. You've got to work out that you're struggling, and then go and seek the answers, cure yourself. Well, it's just cure yourself, but improve yourself in that respect, and then do it yourself. Is that important, do you think?
It depends, I suppose. She couldn't tell anybody else because she felt ashamed about how much money she had and ashamed at her own inability to push the button. So she couldn't ask for help. I think it gives you an opportunity to learn and grow by doing it yourself. I'm all for shortcuts, Emily.
Yeah, no, I think it probably was the right thing to do.
My concern is if you go down that route, it's what's going to be the fallout?
That's what I was just about to say, because I think if someone had done that for me, I, not willingly, but would have resented that person, I suppose, making me do that because it's something I couldn't do. And it may not have been that situation at all, but I think the emotions that are involved, that would be sat in your head because it's not your willing action, is it? You've got to do the work behind it in order to move forward with it.
Mm.
I have to say, I'm sitting here from a position of not really having that much experience personally of this topic that we're talking about, because I'm lucky enough still to have both parents, and I've inherited small amounts of money from my grandparents, but I think it's different when it's a grandparent. I think when it's a parent, I think it actually must be very hard, because you're inevitably very close to a parent, and of course you would always rather have that person sitting opposite you at a table than that money sitting there in the bank account. And that's just why it's so painful, isn't it? Because that number on the statement, that represents that great big void that you've now got in your life. So yeah, I'm just talking about it now, starting to make me realize just how vast that is. But it is difficult, probably, mentally I haven't really gone there, because I haven't had to, and because obviously it's a painful thought. But,
Yeah, I've got another client. It's one of the ones that used that phrase that you used at the start, Emily, custodian. All right. So D is one of my favorite clients because she's just so much fun. She's so bouncy. But she inherited money after her mum passed away. And I think it was one of her friends recommended me to her. And D, she's dead lovely, dead happy, but utterly petrified of money. Utterly terrified of money. And she's got this money from her mum. She goes, right, all through my life, my mum told me, you're useless with money. You're stupid with money. You waste money. You can't keep hold of money. And so she's got 3 siblings. And so they've all inherited. And she goes, I can't mess this up. Right. This is my mum's money. I'm the custodian of the money. I can't mess it up, because she's up there and she's saying all those things about me, what I'm like with money. I'm like, okay, right, well, you've done the right thing. First of all, you've got a professional involved. Okay, so we won't mess up the money now. But it's that idea of being a custodian, and maybe then still feeling judged by the parent.
Yeah, and I was also just thinking, when you're saying that goes back to, our own money stories. We inherit those from our parents, or we learn from our parents. So that's sort of a double whammy in a way, because she's got the beliefs that she took from her childhood and she's lived her life with, and then she's now been presented with this inheritance. So she feels an even a larger sense of duty to do the right thing, to not disappoint her mum. So, but the beliefs came from her mum, so that's quite a process to overcome.
I've got to be honest though, D is bossing her money.
Fab.
Is when we sat down and we're like, okay, so, and it was like getting the keywords out about what do we need to make happen. She goes, it needs to be sensible, it needs to be this, and it needs to be that. Right, okay, so we need to tick all these boxes, and then you and your mum will be happy. She's like, aha. So what about, she's got different pots of money that release each year for her holiday budget. And then she's got all her money is stashed away. And the thing that helped D, that made it all right for her, is all the pots of money have got names on them. Every single pot of money. So we've got the holiday, I think we started with holiday 2019 pot. And now we're up to 2022. There's even one of the accounts in the bank has got cats written on it, because that's paying for the cats. Everything, every pot of money has got a label on it for what it's for. So I don't know if she's worried that her mom's going to turn up and do some auditing. Then she's got everything in order and go, look, I am not just wittering this money away. It is all there with a purpose. And I think that's what's helped her, is she's kind of had a plan and been intentional about what she's going to do with the money. And having me sitting alongside her, it's like if anything goes wrong, she can just point at me and say she did it. Because she's got an advisor involved, she goes, right, well, that's me being sensible with my money, isn't it? And I think, to be honest, I think she feels a little bit of pride now when she's talking to her brother and sister, because obviously she must have this reputation in the family that's been there for years. We've all got a label in our families, but she's like, no, I've got my financial advisor and I've got my money being released for this and I've got my cash flow ladder. And they're all like, wow.
I was just going to tell you about something that you may or may not have heard of, and it just popped into my head when you said everyone's got their role in the family. Because I was at a party the other day and I was chatting to this couple, and they were telling me about this type of therapy that they both do. Can you hear me still? Because
Yeah.
I've just had a message
I'm-
pop up. Okay,
I'm hanging on
fine.
your every word.
All right. Anyway, it's called family constellations. Have you heard of it? Family constellation therapy.
I don't think I have heard of that one.
Basically, it's a belief that, hang on, let me read it here because I've got it up on my
I've heard of
screen.
like the family system thing.
Yeah, so the term family constellations was first used by Alfred Adler in a somewhat different context to refer to the phenomenon that each individual belongs and is bonded in relationship to other members of his or her family system. One premise of his work is that one can inherit trauma. So yeah, so there's the indirect sort of inheritance of trauma and all these kind of feelings, but there's also obviously that we talk about all the time is like behavior therapy that we get from the way that people behave towards us. But I think that the family constellation therapy could actually be really helpful for a lot of people in this situation that we're talking about, because it's to work out where your place is within the family system and work out how you feel about the way that you felt people felt about you within the family system. So you sort of, it's strange, and like, you can talk to an empty chair and as if that person is still alive, and I don't know, this is bizarre. It just sounded really useful, but anyway.
Can I just check my understanding then? Because I'm listening to this and like, oh my God, I need this. There's no way I'm going to get my brothers to go along with this. So are you telling me that I can just pretend my brothers are there and put them in the empty chair?
You could do that.
Oh, I think me and my brothers do need it, but they're not likely to be listening to the Women and Money Cafe.
I also have a friend who's a medium, and I think that is another thing that could help if you feel a certain way about the money that's been left behind and you're unsure about how that person intended for you to use it. If you sort of want to dabble in that respect, you can try and contact them.
I'm going to give that one a pass. I'm with you on your family constellation.
Yeah, I think that one gives me a little bit of sort of shivers. I'm not sure I could deal with that one.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else you want to add, ladies?
No, I think we've covered sort of the challenges that we face, and it is different for everybody, isn't it? But I think the core issues still sit there in one form or another.
Right. Well, shall we end with the sad happy story?
Yes.
Okay, so I had this client, Anna. And Anna was my all-time favorite client. So I want to grow up to be Anna. But sadly, we lost Anna earlier this year. But Anna and her husband, Frank, had been clients of mine for years. Then when Frank passed away, I don't know when that was, maybe about 2000 something. Anyway, Frank had died. And Anna was an 80-year-old woman who had never left the country and had a significant amount of money. So you maybe heard me talk about Anna and going to the opera in Vienna. So she'd been left she's in charge of all this money, and her and Frank had really different approaches to money all their lives, but they went with Frank's way. So he's not here anymore, and she's now having to figure out how to deal with all this money, and it's a lot, and they have no children. And I watched her go through the agonizing and nobody knew how much money they had. It had to be a secret as well. And she had to come to terms with the fact that she was now in charge of the money. It was her, she could do what she wanted with that. So one of the things she did, I got really excited about, is because she'd never left the country, never been in an airplane, took herself off to Vienna to go to the opera. I bloody love that. She's 80, going on an airplane for the first time. But she didn't have any problem spending money on herself, but she didn't need anything either. It was looking at the wider family. And Frank was very much, they're not getting it till we're dead. And he was worried that people would treat them differently if they knew how much money they had. So he wanted the relationships that they had to be genuine based on who they were, not what they had, which you can understand. But Anna was very much I would rather just give them money now, and see them enjoy it. And it took her a long time to be able to reconcile herself with doing this. And so she started out with just small bits, and she'd check in with me because I was the only person that knew how much money she had. Is it okay if I give them a couple of £1,000? I'm like, yes, yes, you can. Okay. Is it all right if I do it again? Yes, yes, you can. Could I buy them a car? Yeah, you can do that. And it just slowly got bigger and bigger what she was doing. And I'm kind of proud to say that when Anna died, she had nothing left. She'd managed to get through all of the money by giving it away and doing the things that she wanted to do and seeing her family enjoy it and taking worries and stresses off them, seeing them progress and do the things they've always wanted to do. And I think from where she was, of not even thinking she was allowed to change the will, to being able to get rid of it all, I just think if someone in the 80s can achieve that kind of level of change and growth, then anybody can.
Such a lovely story. And to actually be able to watch the people enjoy the money.
Yeah.
I
So
suppose being in her 80s, she would have known that obviously she was getting there towards the end, but I think difficulty for a lot of people, they don't do that enough of that, giving it away in their lifetime because of the uncertainty of knowing how long they're going to live. Yeah, but she nailed it. It's brilliant.
I thought Anna was going to be here for forever because I don't think anything would have had the audacity to try and kill her. So the feistiest of feisty ladies. So if I can, I'd actually like to dedicate this episode of the podcast to Anna. Wherever you are, Anna, I hope you're listening.
Yeah,
and enjoying yourself.
That's lovely. And you know what's lovely about lifetime giving is that you usually know the reason why you're giving it. You know that that person needs the money to buy a car or to get on the housing ladder, and so that has purpose. And we talk a lot about purpose, don't we, with money? Every pound should have its purpose. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people who have inherited money have, is that if it hasn't been openly discussed while that person has been alive, because perhaps they didn't have enough foresight to realize that they were approaching the end, that they've received money, but they don't know what that person's intention was with the money. So let's just remind everyone again that how important it is to talk about money, you know, generationally. Let's not have it a big secret that someone's going to inherit a lot of money. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be handed over in a way that is not going to burden the person, but actually make a difference to someone's life in a positive way.
I think that's a fantastic point, Emily. I think it is, because it's one of the conversations I had with Anna throughout her life, is the amount of money that you're going to be leaving. And if they don't know that, that's actually traumatic.
It is.
So all of a sudden they've lost you, and now there's all this money and they had no idea how much it was. That's trauma. So yeah, no, that's a really good point, Emily.
Make the burden of responsibility a lot easier, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm feeling a bit emotional now because we're talking about Anna, and I do love Anna, and I know you're listening to me wherever you are. Okay, but I'm going to wrap it up here. Just what Emily was saying there about talking and about generational inheriting beliefs and what have you. If you want to know a little bit more about that and how to manage it, you probably want to tune in to Women in Money Cafe episode number 50, which is coming soon, which is, can you really change your money mindset? Spoiler alert, you can. Until next time though, right? Thank you for joining us today on the sofa, Michelle.
Thank you very much.
And Emily, thank you for your contributions.
Thank you.
Okay, and we will see you next time.
Bye.